Ladies and gentlemen, good day. I'm very pleased to present the talk, Sustainable Development Goals and the Role that Higher Education Institutions Could Play. My name is Saurabh Sinha. I serve as the Executive Dean for the Faculty of Engineering and the Built Environment at the University of Johannesburg in South Africa. This keynote is being delivered for the 5th International Conference on Infrastructure Development in Africa, and our privilege to host this conference with two universities in West Africa, the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology and the Bells University of Technology in Ghana and Nigeria, respectively. I will start by presenting a rationale for Sustainable Development Goals, and this first part may seem a little disconnected, but as you see the connection between the different topics, it would make a lot more sense. This particular image reflects the path for sustainable development as once presented by Jeffrey Sachs, at the time director of the Earth Institute at Columbia University. What we see in this image are bright white lines that reflect connectivity of air traffic. We see the blue lines reflecting the ship traffic, and we see the green lines that reflect the road networks. And what we see from here is that the world is a lot more connected in terms of transportation infrastructure than we have ever had before. As you probably expected, if we had to look at this similarly for telecommunications, then telecommunication networks are also pretty prevalent in the world. And if you look at the, don't worry too much about the orange or the purple, it's just different frequencies. But the bottom line is that telecommunications is a lot more binding than we've had before. The impact of telecommunications and the internet era, here we reflect Facebook, the social media platform in particular, but you could do a similar mapping for very many other type of digital communications that is occurring today. Again, we see deep interconnectedness, nothing like what we have ever seen before. On this particular image, we are observing the air traffic routing, but it could be anything else. It could also be data. And you'd very quickly see that this is something that occurs through the day and night. There are obviously some good sides to this. There are some negative sides to it. A negative side to this that we saw of this global connectedness that we saw was in 2008. We saw when there was air traffic, there was an economic turmoil. We immediately saw that the world was impacted very quickly once the issues came out of the United States. And that is perhaps a negative, but certainly like that negative scenario, there are many examples of good that has also been propagated similarly, that we should continue to have gratitude towards. Today, digital technology is much more prevalent and it has the option and the opportunity to offer big data. And big data, of course, needs to be analyzed and analytics that comes out of this utilized to better position us. Again, like the good and the bad that we talked about earlier, big data and the impact and implications, especially through computational intelligence, artificial intelligence, has to be impacted in a positive way. And I think if we incorporate in our education systems and streams these positive kind of constructive thinking, we are more likely to have a similar yield. So moving a little bit forward onto the subsystems of sustainable development, again, as presented by Professor Sachs, we notice the four subsystems: the techno-economic systems, the earth systems, the geopolitical systems, and social dynamics. And it's interesting that the first circle on top refers to techno-economic rather than just economic development. Technology has a major impact in economic development, and these needs to be a lot more, and that's the reason for this connected text. We tend to come from different disciplines, so we may come from a discipline that relates more to earth systems and more to economics, more to social sciences, or international relations, political science, but and that's fine. The undergraduate discipline that this builds is okay. The trouble is that in today's very heavily connected world, the solutions that is sought requires an understanding of different spheres rather than only one particular domain. I'll give an example of this. This example comes from the Syrian conflict. From a techno-economic perspective, inflation, inequality, and unemployment. On the other hand, from a geopolitics, the role that the United States and Russia are playing differently in the area, and of course, sectarian divisions between the Islamic populations, the Islamic constituencies, were probably who worked and lived side by side with one another. Today, we find these divisions to be much more prominent. Perhaps we are able to think about these divisions, but maybe we forget that these areas in Syria and also a number of other countries that faced the Arab Spring, that these nations were all areas that were hit with through a mega drought in the recent past. And mega drought leading to food scarcity has certainly played a role that we probably don't always think about. So again, if we have to look at the Syrian context and the solving the Syrian conflict, then it's, we tend to look at it from one dimension or the other, but we probably need to look at it from these four multiple dimensions. Unless we look at it from multiple dimensions, we have the possibility of suffering from some level of dementia. And in this illustration, it is easy for us to radicalize a position. You may have a position that says, well, the conflict is really due to the sectarian divisions. Meanwhile, we may have ignored the fact that food scarcity has also been, has played a major role, and so has the geopolitics. So it is in the totality is what is needed as ingredients of today and tomorrow's curricula, especially if we're interested in realizing sustainable development. So let's go a little back to September 2000, when the Millennium Development Goals were realized, and of course, our gratitude goes to the 7th Secretary General of the United Nations, Kofi Annan, one of the graduates of one of our partner universities that's here today, the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology. What is interesting is, let's take one of the Millennium Development Goals. Let's take number 1, eradicating extreme poverty and hunger. So for clarity, extreme poverty refers to people that live under $1 a day. And in 1990, this represented some 47% of the world, and almost 2 billion people. And if you look at the progress that was made till 1999, there was a decline, but it was rather slim as compared to 2015, 15 years after the conceptualization, after the world made their minds, some 89 countries made up their mind that the Millennium Development Goal is something that we ought to work together towards. And we saw a serious decline to some 14% of the global population. Once again, reflecting that poverty is not natural, it is man-made, and it is something that humanity can do and deal with. So we are certainly not there. If you look at the 8 Millennium Development Goals, there are opportunities for us to do more, and these goals have now been transferred and translated to the Sustainable Development Goals signed by some 193 countries on the 25th of September 2015. So here are the Sustainable Development Goals, and if you look closely, the aspects of the Millennium Development Goal, such as poverty, still is here, but the first Millennium Development Goal has been spread into 2 or more, and hunger, for example, is a separate Sustainable Development Goal. The question of ensuring sustainable environment has now been broken down into several components, such as clean water and sanitation is Sustainable Development Goal 6. Clean energy is number 7. Sustainable cities is 11. Climate action is 13. And there's a separation between life below water and life on land. But a critical aspect, when you reflect upon the Millennium Development Goals, there were typically about half the number of people that live under extreme poverty. And the difference in Sustainable Development Goals is that it's not about 50%, but it's about reaching 100%. It's about ending poverty in all its form and everywhere. So it's for everyone and it's for everywhere. And this is a new challenge that we need to take up. So let's take the example of water. So in 1990, 43% of the world had access to clean to water, to piped drinking water. And if we look at 2015, it's 57%. The world exceeded this goal. The goal was to achieve at least 50%, and that was done through the collective effort of various governments that participated in the Sustainable Development Goals. If we have to move from 57% to 80%, say in 2025, it's just a hypothetical figure, it's probably possible. But what becomes really difficult is when you want to move from 80% to 100%. What is needed for this? This is so-called the last mile challenge, and I will discuss this last mile challenge later on, but getting from 80 to 100% is probably possible, but it most likely requires an infinite budget. So if any one of you has an infinite budget, let us know. Our university students are always looking for funding, and we'll be grateful to you. So what is it that we should do as higher education institutions that will enable us, South Africa, Africa, West Africa, East Africa, Africa as one, to remain in to be in the victory lap as we approach 2030? I like this image. This image shows Archimedes trying to move the world, and when I think about what we are trying to do, I think very much similarly. In this image, we represent Sustainable Development Goals as being what could help us to move the world to a better world. Bolting forward to a couple of leading global universities, and just to have a look at what it is that they are doing and how have they re-envisioned their approach. University of California has taken an approach of interdisciplinary programs that enable for service to society, emphasis on community, entrepreneurs. Still at the University of California, working in teams. Stanford University, seeking solutions to important global problems, educating leaders who will make the world a better place, using the power of engineering. Now for our audience today, please note that when I use the word engineering, I'm referring to engineering in its broad sense, engineering technology, as well as the professions of the built environment. Another image from Stanford University seeking innovation, pivotal technologies, and thousands of companies. Quite the nature for Silicon Valley, I suppose. Drive for technology transfer. Creating a startup, app development, spirit of entrepreneurship. Moving away from Stanford to MIT, looking at exceptional community, looking to educate engineering leaders. So it's a little bit of a shift. Universities currently probably graduate engineers. We are also moving away from that at the University of Johannesburg, where we are looking to not just graduate engineers, but we're looking at those that would also become leaders of engineering technology, and leaders of the built environment. At MIT, innovation focus, flexible hands-on curricula. Talking about flexible, here is a flexible curricula, a computer science degree with the option of molecular biology. That's probably something unusual, and this is what is being called for, unusual and a flexible approach to teaching and learning. Moving to Imperial College London, internationally competitive research. Looking at a couple of their undergraduate programs, the emphasis that teaching is research-led. Zurich, very strong focus on results into practice. A number of their programs have resonance with the Millennium Development Goals, world food systems, cities of the future, climate change, energy, health, risk research. Information processing has the big data connection, new materials, industrial processes. Moving further east to Tsinghua University in China, social commitment is reflected here and actions speaking louder than words. Still at Tsinghua, students educated to be leaders, that resonates with some of the universities in the US, civilizing China and the world, and it gives us the analogy to what we could do in Africa. Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, working as a community towards our next miracle. Broadening research, also in undergraduate education. Creating an institute for advanced studies. Very recently, the University of Johannesburg, we have also developed our own institute for advanced studies in a partnership with Nanyang Technological University in Singapore. So similar trend over there. I looked at their programs in electronic engineering. See, my background is in electronic engineering, so it was a bit of a natural interest. And I hope to find some stuff about electronics, which I did. I also found ecotronics. And if you look at the background, certainly it has that ecological connection. Rice University, a small private university in the US, gives the link to professors to know you by your name, so a strong personal contact, people contact. Still at Rice, doing a first degree in BA and then going into other disciplines, law, business, and medicine. So it gives you this approach of clear emphasis on inter, cross, and multidisciplinary work. Still it drives not just conventional wisdom, but unconventional wisdom, again resonating quite with our own at the University of Johannesburg. Our logo rethinking, reinventing is a very important part of the way that we do our own business. So, did you see that? What did you see? You saw a couple of game changers? Or did you see that the game is changing? I think we not only need to observe that the game is changing, but we need to determine what it is that we should do to change the game. What it is that we should do to not be with the wave, but be the wave. So, some examples on how we can change our thinking for sustainability. Sustainability has the three pillars: social, environmental, and economic. Of course, a very important underlayer is governance. I don't in particular like this diagram on the left, because it tends to bring about this impression that it is one or the other on the three pillars. But the reality, of course, is that society benefits from economic growth within it, and society is part of the environment. And this takes me to an important quotation from Mahatma Gandhi, where Mahatma Gandhi said that the world has enough for everyone's need, but not enough for everyone's greed. And this is the contextualization. So let's take this one step further into an example. In this example, we're talking about how do we change the thinking, and I bring forward a Chinese proverb that if you give a person a fish, you have fed the person for today. You teach a person to fish, and you have fed the person for a lifetime. But if you teach the person how to process and package fish for export and market it, then you have in fact stimulated economic development. And that starts to take us to the two pillars of society and economics. But if you do too much to it, you're going to have an impact on the ecological system, and the biodiversity would be affected. That would in fact bring to instability this entire process, and therefore the need for sustainable thinking. I'm going to shift to a slightly different example, and firstly have a look at the image on the right. And the image on the right brings forward our continent, and this continent is well lit up, and what you would see is the areas of light in the West Africa, South Africa, and parts of the North Africa, and darkness in many other parts of the continent, unfortunately, meaning that there are individuals that are unable to benefit from energy. If you move away from the electricity example and you look at telecommunications, particularly mobile communications, has had a much stronger penetration over a shorter period of time. And one could attribute this to the way that telecommunication is deployed, is that it's a combination of technologies. It could be fiber going to an antenna then propagating wirelessly from one area to the other. And this we see in a farming area in this picture. So telecommunications, very decentralized thinking in deployment, electricity transmission and distribution often coming from power stations, and the requiring high investment, and often one wonders whether if you deploy the distribute to a rural area, whether that rural area will not it will be difficult to have a return on investment as the population continues to urbanize. If we then move to the example with water, what we found that it could be possible to get to 80%, and moving to 100%, we said earlier on that it probably requires an infinite budget. Now, if you don't have an infinite budget, you have to rely on innovation. And innovation, as in the example with telecommunications, could be achieved through decentralization. And one mechanism for such decentralization could be that you build infrastructure, you build residential setup, you build a rural housing such that there is localized catchment, water catchment possibilities. There are more opportunities for rainwater harvesting. And this may give us some hybrid solutions in reaching the 100% target. So it's diversify solutions, like you diversify investment, like you diversify energy sources. So by changing the way that we currently think, by broadening our approach, we start to not only address the aspect of sustainable water and sanitation, but we bring to the benefit that if you have local piped drinking water as an option, then you may take women who typically in many rural areas are the ones that go and fetch water. Many times it's girls who should rather be in the classroom, and by providing such a water solution, we start to deal with the provision of quality education that in turn will bring about gender equality. So the Sustainable Development Goals are all very closely related to one another, and therefore there are quite a few. Now, it is natural for us to often, when we are reading from left to right, that we read opportunities nowhere as what I have here. But can we read a little bit differently? Can we rethink? Can we reinvent? And can we read this as opportunity is now here, especially for us in higher education? From an infrastructure perspective, many of you here are from an infrastructure background. Where is some of the investment foreseen? And this study was done by Frost and Sullivan. This is already in 2012, so progress has been made, but in many areas, transport, certainly a very big area for a more connected continent, energy, diversifying sources, driving renewables, water, need for a decentralized hybrid solutions. It's very costly to connect water from big dams from one part to the other and have this uncertainty that drought continues to bring. Of course, this diagram doesn't include ICT infrastructure, but still reflects that over a 5-year period, the investment is anticipated in the region of $1 trillion. This work is still ongoing and therefore continues to remind us of the opportunity, of the obligation that we have. So, some actions for sustainable development education. So the first one could be done very easily. And this is not necessarily dealing with curricula, because I know, being in a higher education institution, that changing curricula is hard. Changing curricula takes time. But we could do something about pedagogy. And in one example of implementing pedagogy rapidly is to do engineering projects in community service. Is that difficult or unusual? Yes. It's not what we're used to doing, but if you think about learning, and it brings to memory a quotation that from Benjamin Franklin, that if you tell me, I will forget. If you teach me, I may remember. But if you involve me, I will learn. And that is what EPICS looks at. We have implementation examples of EPICS where our students working in groups, working with Engineers Without Borders, have gone out and developed an electrification process for a township here in Johannesburg, in Katrada Park, working together with the University of Johannesburg Metropolitan Academy, a secondary school. And so, in this, in EPICS, non-profit organizations identify the problem that a community faces, and the challenge is then taken up by university students who develop solutions that are sustainable in nature. So it brings about an early exposure to complex systems approach, which incorporates the various components of sustainable development, including social dynamics, earth systems, geopolitics, and techno-economics. For instance, in this case, students would get exposed to what is the, not just to the units of electricity as watt, but also to watt per rand per, the watt per rand value, a kilowatt per hour per cent value. Similarly, we have a team that went out yesterday to Guakwani in Venda, and they're looking at rural electrification, a decentralized approach. We are also looking at a number of new online and in-contact academic programs, and you would notice that most of these are at the master's level, because we do want students to develop that initial discipline-specific undergraduate approach, but at the postgraduate level, we have a couple of sustainable development programs, for example, a master's in sustainable energy, sustainable urban planning and development, and these have gone through the relevant accreditation process. We're developing sustainable mining, and we have also going through accreditation is a master's in water supply and sanitation management. So these programs are, will equip students in a multidisciplinary environment. So the courses have been designed that can receive students that come from law, that come from economics, that come from the humanities, and they will sit together in one classroom and they will solve problems that are that society faces out there. So we are moving away from the principle or the concept of a laboratory in a university to a laboratory of society, a laboratory where Johannesburg becomes a lab. We are also looking and inviting universities that are present here today to work with us on joint international and regional qualifications and joint projects to give students that pursue these masters, but also otherwise students and researchers, to complex social physical systems approach. We have recently developed our Center for Applied Research and Innovation in the Built Environment, or CARENB, and this is located here at the University of Johannesburg and is open for partnership. We also wish to participate in the United Nations Sustainable Development Solutions Network. So these are some examples or actions that we could seek as resulting from this conference. In closing, I'd like to iterate that sustainable development education is a catalyst for us and the world to achieve sustainable development goals. On the left hand of this image is this slide is the peace pole from Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, and also some words from the great leader, that it is clear that we must find an African solution to our problems, and that this can only be found in African unity. Divided, we are weak. United Africa could become one of the greatest forces for good in the world. With these words, I would like to once again thank our three universities that have served together to this conference. I also want to say that there's an old Chinese proverb that says that the best time to do something is 20 years ago. But if you can't do that, the second best time is to do it now. And ahead of the World Cup, we said Kinako, meaning that the time is now. The time is now for us to influence our curricula, our pedagogy, our teaching and learning, our research and innovation for sustainable development, and this responsibility is on us. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attention.